Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel for part number 24 of the ongoing Minneapolis-Moline Prototype 445 number X231 tractor restoration series. I've got a whole lot of cast iron laid out in front of you here. On this side I have the prototype transmission housing and rear end housing, and right next to it on the other side is the production rear end housing and transmission housing. And to stay consistent with what I've been doing in the earlier X231 videos, I want to just kind of document some of the differences in the castings between the prototype X231 housings and the eventual production 445 ones. On the surface they don't look that different, but when you really get to looking at them, you can tell there was a lot more going on with the prototype than there is with this more streamlined production version here. So I don't want to get too long-winded into this, but I'm going to start with these rear end housings since there's probably the least to go over with these. The transmissions have a lot more differences, but you're already pretty familiar with these because of all the work I've done on this, so let's get into it. So first and probably most obvious difference between these two rear ends is going to be the casting number. This is the 10X piece, of course, and that number's on the bottom, and because this is heavy and I don't feel like tipping it up just to show you the number, I'll cut to the still shot now. And now we compare that to the production piece that has the 10A5606 number. Really, I went over these pretty well. We'll just take a look in here. You all are familiar with this area here where I did all that repair. You can see I want to point out the lack of gusseting between this upper bore and then the lower bore for the PTO shaft. Also no gusseting down there at the bottom. Compare that to the production rear end, and you can see we have a rather heavy gusset right there between those two bores and another one that goes on down to the floor. So made that a little bit better supported. Lessons learned, perhaps, I don't know. You can see here we have the 4 holes in the front where the shift rails need to poke into that rear end housing a little bit, and they've beefed this up a bit right here too, added a little extra material. Whereas this flange is pretty much just even thickness all the way through, and this one goes all the way through to the back side. I still haven't really figured that out. I think I'm going to have to do something with that, like maybe put a little cup plug there so long as it doesn't interfere with the rail, because if I don't plug that, it's going to leak oil something fierce all around here, make a heck of a mess, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Brake compartments on the prototype versus the production are pretty much the same. The only real difference I can see is the prototype has these two bumps that stick up on each side, and the production does not. So I'm not sure if these were just part of the casting process for this this housing, or if they had maybe envisioned potentially drilling a hole down through there for a bore for like a pivot lever or something, some different style brake setup. That's all speculation at this point, but nothing was ever done with them, so I really don't know what the story is behind that. Back ends of the cases are pretty much the same. Belt pulley goes in the side on each one. The area where the hydraulic pump mounts and the PTO comes out is pretty much the same. Hydraulic ports on top, pretty much all the same. No real differences there to speak of. And finally, axle tube housings are pretty much the same. Same style bolt holes in each one, same mounting locations. Pretty much all I want to look at here is the difference in how well they cast these two pieces. Now here's the production piece. Put the straight edge on there. You can see it doesn't rock. It's pretty well flat across on top of that tube for being cast iron. We'll look at the prototype one, and you can see it's got a great big bulge in the middle that you can rock that pretty good on. It's almost like their casting mold had shifted a little bit, because you can look at the bottom, and we've got another pretty good bump out down here. So it's almost like it's kind of distorted up through that area, but doesn't seem to have ever caused a problem. It's just a bit rougher casting. They probably didn't quite take the time that they did with the production ones, and it was probably like a one-off mold anyway, so didn't really matter. Okay guys, now that we have the rear end housings out of the way, we'll look at the transmission ones. Prototype one here, obviously we have the prototype number 10X4913, and we'll look at the production one. Of course, the casting number is on the opposite side. On that one, we have the 10A5609. They also added the MM with Made in USA All the production transmission housings had their model and serial number tag back here, whereas you'll remember the last video on X231, the prototype tag is in this area. I removed it for the cleaning and stuff. It'll go back on at a later date. We'll just compare some external differences now. On the production casting, we have this rod that sticks out. It's for the bracket that pivots, that locks the brake pedals applied. This one you can see is mounted down low in this bore down here. Compare that to the prototype housing, and it's mounted up a lot higher. We do have this open hole down here where that rod is installed in the production version, but there's just nothing in it, and they have that rod up a little higher for their pivot bracket because it's a little bit different brake pedal design. You can see we have like some bumps here on each side in the same spot on the production housing. I think that was to rest it on a machining fixture, whereas the prototype housing is clean, doesn't have them. Another difference between the prototype transmission casting and the production, we have this heavy peg that sticks out of the side here. You can see there's a boss inside here to support it. That's where the clutch pedal mounts on the prototype. It has an exaggerated, overly complicated, redundant clutch pedal linkage, whereas the production one did not. The clutch pedal pretty much went right to the source on that. But another open bore right here for something, who knows. They put quite a raised boss there with another one inside. They may have had plans for something to go there and that they eliminated, or they just never put one there anyway. Another interesting aspect from the prototype gear case is it has this little kind of handmade little metal trough that will go, hopefully you can see, right in this hole up here and bolts to the side of the case. What that trough does is it catches oil that's being flung around by the gears, transmission gears rotating, and it funnels that oil up into this front compartment where the high-low range torque amplifier is, and helps to actually raise the fluid level in that compartment so that that high-low unit can pick that oil up. You look over here, it was an important enough design feature that they cast that in, made it an integral piece of the housing. So one less separate piece that they had to bolt in and risk possibly coming loose and rattling around, getting in gears, stuff like that. And speaking of the torque amplifier high-low range planetary gear set, this is the compartment where that would be. On the production one, you can see they give you the plug on the side for accessing that high-low range unit for adjustment. The prototype housing does not have the plug on the right side, but it has one on the left side that you can see is kind of like an afterthought, like they drilled a hole and threaded it for a large pipe plug so you could go in there and adjust on that unit. You can tell the prototype housing did not have, originally I don't believe, the same style of high-low range unit that the eventual production one did. Although this tractor does have that style in it now, and you can tell from some of the cues on this transmission that it was added at the factory at a later time. I think there was a lot more going on with this one in that department than there was with the eventual production unit. We'll just contrast. Here's your top cover on the production version for that high-low range unit. Nothing there, just a flat plate. Compare that flat plate to this heavy piece of cast iron here, which is the top cover for the torque amplifier unit on the prototype here. And it has, looks like a 10X number. We have 10X with a 5, and then a bolt hole goes right through it. Pretty much obliterates the rest of it. But you can tell there's a whole lot going on here that is not going on that one. We have this boss right here. We have this, looks like possibly a travel stop for some sort of linkage. I don't know. Very, very heavy duty cast. Get this out of the way. Another thing we see on the prototype housing that's not on the production is this raised boss right here with this plug on the top. You can see over here, there's just nothing. It's a flat top. And look down inside, there's also another hole way down here, which is right in line with this one here, like a vertical shaft had went down, like maybe they had a clutch fork in there that pivoted on axis up and down, as opposed to what they ended up doing with it. You can see, get the light out of the way for you. They welded in like a collar right here, put a plug in this side, and they did the same thing over here, and they have a recessed bore for an oil seal. That's because, like I mentioned earlier, this does have the production style high-low range unit in, and the handle, the lever for that would come out of this side and operate the over-center clutch in a manner horizontally instead of vertically, which I think there used to be an old shaft coming down here that accomplished that. And again, going back to these kind of after-the-fact modifications that were made to accommodate the more similar style high-low range that the production had, you can see the old weld here that they had ground flush. There appears to be a little bit of a crack going around, and I think that was due to the heat being localized in that area of the casting, different rates of expansion and contraction between the weld material and the parent material. I didn't get too worried about this because it's all solid. I put some penetrating grade Loctite down in there, let it sit upright on its side for a couple days and let that stuff really set up, just to seal any potential leaks that may arise right there. And you can see on the inside where they also welded those collars, and the welds look pretty good in there. Nothing is loose, it's all stable, so I wasn't going to open up any can of worms by trying to V that out and re-weld that too. I just left it the way it is. It doesn't bother me a bit. Okay guys, and finally the last few differences I want to point out lie in the bell housing area. The prototype housing is pretty well flat up here, whereas the production one has this heavy raised area with two threaded mounting holes in it. One thing that's kind of neat about the prototype casting is there's all kinds of extra bosses on this thing that looks like were put in place possibly for different clutch fork designs. It's hard to say. We have this one up here, which is also present on the other side, that is not on the production piece. We have this one down here with one on the corresponding side, which is also not present on the production piece. But the established clutch release yoke release fork bores are the same between the prototype and production. They're all in the same spot. We have an extra, looks like, inspection hole here with a little plate and with like a machine screw that held it on, that is not there on the production casting. And we have this mystery hole right here. I really don't know what it's for, and there was nothing that was in it when we took it apart either. It comes all the way in here, and I really don't know what it's for. It's not for lubricating the throwout bearing, because they did that the same way on both of these. You had like a grease gun hose that would go in this little hole here with pipe threads that would feed up to the release bearing, and then they would put a grease zerk in out here, and they did the same setup on the production transmission. So I can only speculate as to what that is for. I really don't know, and it doesn't make any sense. There's no threads in it that would seal it, but I know on some prior prototypes, potential replacements to the Z's, Minneapolis-Moline did have a patented design that it was like a clutch and throttle combination control that had a bunch of linkages that went into the bell housing through just open bores like this. And it was kind of a wild thing where you could close the throttle and it would release the clutch at the same time. You could then upshift, downshift, open the throttle back up, it would automatically engage the clutch, and off you went. I don't think it ever made it to any of the production tractors, but maybe they had something like this in here at one time, or they had drilled a provision for it and just never used it. I don't know. So that pretty much covers the main differences between the pre-production prototype pieces and the eventual streamlined production 445 tractor components. And if you guys didn't understand anything or something seemed a bit vague about the internal parts and pieces as I was going through, just keep on following along with the progress on this restoration, because as I start putting these things together, it should become more and more clear. If you made it this far into the video and you're still watching, great, I appreciate it. I know some of these like detail comparison videos can get kind of dry at times, just a lot of information, but I wanted to document this stuff as long as I had all these castings in the same place at the same time. So stay tuned for more progress on this. More videos are yet to come. I'm going to start throwing pieces back into these now. No more excuses. I've got everything done. So as always, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment below. I always enjoy talking to you guys in the comment section, and I hope to see you back again.